flankers and a lone MiG-29 Fulcrum tore down the makeshift runway of an undisclosed airfield. Afterburners lit trailing streaks of heat through the cold morning haze. Their destination, a newly established Russian air battle coordination node, located just 18 miles across the border, near Belgorod. According to NATO signals intelligence and satellite confirmation, the site had only gone fully operational 72 hours prior. It wasn't just a command center, it was a nerve hub, linking Russian S-400 systems, early warning radars, and aerial patrols into a unified kill chain. If left untouched, it would extend Russian air dominance deep into Ukrainian skies. But Ukraine wasn't going to let that happen. The mission was simple on paper, lethal in practice. Pierce one of the most heavily defended air corridors on the planet. Strike the target and get out before Russian fighters or SAMs could lock on. The stakes were clear. A successful hit could unravel months of Russian planning. A failure might hand Moscow uncontested air control over eastern Ukraine. Fuel tanks were topped. Bomb racks carried JDAM-ERs modified for long-distance precision. The MiG-29 would serve as bait, flying high to attract radar locks, while the two Su-27 second would ride the treetops, flying just 200 feet above ground level to stay below radar coverage. No music played in the cockpits. No good luck charms. Only radio silence, steady breathing, and the kind of tension you could measure in PSI. The hunt had begun. The Ukrainian pilots weren't flying into a target. They were flying into a fortress. The Russian coordination base near Belgorod wasn't just any installation. It was protected by a multi-layered air defense network so dense, so complex, that NATO analysts referred to it as a no-fly lattice. At the heart of this network stood the 91 N6E Big Bird radar, a massive phased array system capable of tracking targets over 350 miles out, even low-flying aircraft cloaked by terrain. Supporting it was the Podlet M radar, optimized for detecting cruise missiles and fighters at low altitudes, and the Murmansk BN electronic warfare complex, Russia's most advanced long-range jamming system, capable of suppressing GPS and comms within a 600-mile radius. Surrounding the site were at least 2 batteries of S-400 Triumph missile systems, each able to launch 40 N6 missiles with a range of nearly 250 miles. These were reinforced by Panzer S-1 units to cover the lower altitude gap, and Buck M3 systems positioned further back for medium-range engagements. Together, they created an overlapping dome of interception, one that had turned back nearly every drone, missile, and reconnaissance aircraft sent its way. In the skies above, Su-35S fighters patrolled on rotating shifts armed with R-77M air-to-air missiles and equipped with Urbis E radars, giving them near AWACS-level situational awareness. These weren't just interceptors, they were predators. On paper, no fourth-generation aircraft should have been able to survive an approach, let alone deliver a strike against this level of defense. The airspace was considered impenetrable without stealth, jamming support, or satellite deception. But that morning, Ukraine wasn't sending paper. It was sending men who knew how to fly below the map, play by no rules, and thread needles through radar webs. They weren't just gambling with their lives. They were daring to challenge one of the most defended air zones in modern warfare. The Russian air defenses were built to counter logic, not creativity. Knowing this, Ukraine didn't send stealth bombers or a swarm of drones. It sent a ghost formation, 3 jets that would move like one, mislead like 10, and strike like lightning. At 6:04 a.m., the attack package entered the outer edge of Russian radar coverage. Every second from here on out would be scripted, down to the foot. The two Su-27 second broke low, very low. Flying just 150 feet above the ground, they hugged the terrain, weaving between tree lines, radio towers, and abandoned villages at nearly 600 miles per hour. At that altitude, a single miscalculation could mean impact. But that was the point. At 150 feet, even the mighty Podlet M radar had blind spots. The Big Sam's S-400 second weren't designed to fire on shadows dancing below the radar horizon. Meanwhile, the MiG-29 played its part perfectly. Flying high at 28,000 feet with its transponder active and radar pinging, it mimicked the profile of a bomber headed straight for the base. It was a deliberate sacrifice. Every Russian radar in the sector locked on. Every operator's eyes followed that single dot. But the real trick wasn't in the jets. It was in the sky above them. At 45,000 feet, a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone spoofed the electromagnetic signature of a long-range strike aircraft. For nearly 4 minutes, it flooded the Russian EW grid with decoy signals, false targets, fake trajectories, and artificial Doppler returns. The Murmansk BN, confused and overfed with data, momentarily jammed itself. In that brief window, the Su-27 seconds slipped through the seams of the unbreakable defense web. Russia was looking up, but death was coming from below. For all its billion-dollar complexity, Russia's air defense grid still relied on one fragile element: timing. At exactly 6:07 a.m., the electromagnetic noise flooding the sky above Belgorod reached critical mass. Between the atmospheric inversion, the drone-spoofed radar clutter, and the lingering ground fog, Russian operators couldn't tell what was real, what was decoy, and what was simply noise. The Murmansk BN jamming suite, overwhelmed with conflicting frequencies, temporarily locked out its own radar feed. For a fleeting moment, the most protected airspace on Earth had gone blind. That was all the Ukrainians needed. From 25 miles out, flying just above the treetops, the lead Su-27 began its ascent nose angled sharply toward the early morning sky. It wasn't climbing to fight, it was climbing to throw. At 6 hours, 7 minutes, and 41 seconds, the pilot executed a precision loft bombing maneuver, releasing a JDAM-ER GPS-guided bomb at a near-parabolic angle. The bomb soared high, climbing to over 10,000 feet before arching downward like a thrown spear. Its target, the central node of the Russian Air Battle Coordination Hub. And its timing was flawless. At 6 hours, 8 minutes, and 14 seconds, just as the Russian radar systems began to reboot and reacquire targets, the JDAM-ER struck home. It impacted the heart of the base at Mach 1, punching through a reinforced roof before detonating with a blast equivalent to 500 pounds of high explosive. The explosion wasn't just physical, it was digital. Data links, antennae, relay terminals, all gone in a blink. The nerve center went dark. One bomb, one breach, all in under 45 seconds. By the time the second Su-27 released its own bomb, the Russian air defense network was already 2 steps behind, scrambling to find threats that had already vanished. The storm had begun, and Russia hadn't even realized it was raining. The first blast shattered the illusion of Russian invincibility. The next 2 made sure it stayed broken. Just seconds after the initial JDAM-ER struck the coordination hub, the second, Su-27, unleashed its payload. Another lofted bomb, same altitude, same arc, same purpose cut through the fading morning fog like a judgment. This one didn't aim for command. It aimed for fuel and fire. At 6 hours, 8 minutes, and 32 seconds, the second JDAM slammed into a hardened supply depot tucked behind the base's perimeter wall, an insulated logistics bunker, storing dozens of Orlan 30 surveillance drones and several crated Iranian-made Shahed 136 loitering munitions. The explosion ripped through the concrete with precision-guided range. Secondary detonations followed, a chain reaction of burning lithium, ruptured fuel tanks, and warheads primed for export to Ukrainian cities. But it wasn't over yet. Trailing just behind, the MiG-29 having successfully played decoy dove to 15,000 feet and released the third and final JDAM. Unlike the others, this one wasn't aimed at a physical target. It was aimed at silence. Its impact point, the base's main satellite uplink tower, Russia's direct line to its military command in Voronezh. At 6 hours, 8 minutes, and 49 seconds, the tower disappeared in a flash of fire and pulverized steel. Communications across the sector fell dead. Monitors froze, radios hissed, no commands could be issued. No reinforcements could be called. The base designed to be Russia's digital eye and ear over eastern Ukraine was blind, deaf, and burning. Power failed. Backup generators didn't engage. Smoke poured through every corridor. Sensors failed. Security cameras blinked off. A $300 million complex, crippled in under 90 seconds by 3 bombs, and a strategy built on misdirection and timing. No alarm sounded. no counterstrikes were launched. The base wasn't just hit, it was erased. When the smoke finally began to settle over Belgorod, what remained wasn't just damage, it was devastation. The satellite imagery told the story before Russian officials could even react. A firestorm nearly 2 miles wide was still burning, black smoke billowing into the upper atmosphere, visible from space. Inside the blast zone, the heat had melted radar dishes into warped metal, collapsed hardened shelters, and left craters big enough to swallow trucks. It wasn't a precision strike, it was a surgical dismemberment. In total, Russia lost 3 key radar systems: the 91N6E Big Bird, the Podlet M low-altitude array, and a mobile early warning unit brought in just days earlier. 5 air defense launchers, 2 S-400 batteries, 2 Buk M3 second, and 1 Panzer S-1 were rendered non-operational for at least 4 hours due to blast shock, wiring damage, or shrapnel cuts in their guidance systems. Crews abandoned their posts, some vehicles were flipped or scorched, and command linkages were severed. The chaos extended beyond the perimeter. Several Su-34 fullback Street Reich fighters stationed at a nearby airstrip were seen taxiing away from hangars in emergency dispersal maneuvers. Ground crews scrambled to push munitions-laden aircraft away from expanding fires. The fear wasn't another bomb, it was the possibility that the fire could cook off warheads in storage. The psychological shock hit even harder. For years, Russia believed its integrated air defense could not be cracked by fourth-generation aircraft. Yet here, it was bypassed not by stealth jets, but by upgraded Cold War relics flown by pilots who understood terrain, timing, and the flaws in doctrine. This wasn't just a tactical blow, it was a reputational gut punch. The kind of loss that echoed from a charred command post all the way back to the Kremlin. At first, the mission was hailed as a tactical victory, crippling radar, silencing command, and knocking out Russia's most fortified air coordination node near Belgorod. But then came the real shock. As thermal satellite scans poured in and AI-assisted image analysis began mapping the damage, U.S. intelligence analysts noticed something unusual. Amid the wreckage, reinforced containers buried near the southern quadrant of the base had erupted in ways that standard munitions simply couldn't explain. One container had been thrown over 200 feet, its protective shielding blown apart. Others burned with a deep, unnatural glow. Within 36 hours, the Pentagon confirmed the unthinkable. The facility had been a tactical nuclear forward storage site. Inside those containers were believed to be low-yield nuclear warheads, estimated in the 1 to 5 kiloton range, intended for use on Iskander-M short-range ballistic missiles. These weren't strategic nukes for global war. These were battlefield weapons, part of Russia's so-called escalate to de-escalate doctrine, a brutal concept meant to force NATO or Ukraine into retreat by threatening localized atomic strikes. The blast had compromised at least 2 of these warheads, possibly rendering them inoperable. More importantly, it revealed the exact location of a nuclear stockpile that Russia had denied even existed in the Kharkiv-Sumy sector. It was a global wake-up call. This wasn't just a strike on infrastructure, it was a direct disruption of Russia's tactical nuclear posture in eastern Ukraine. The attack didn't just blind their radars, it cut the fuse to their quietest threat. And in doing so, Ukraine didn't just win a battle. It exposed the hidden teeth of Moscow's deterrence and knocked a few of them out. What began as a precision airstrike evolved into something far more consequential. Ukraine didn't just breach a fortress. They rewrote the rules of modern aerial warfare using relics of the past. The Su-27 second and Mi-G-29 second that flew this mission were aircraft designed during the Cold War, machines older than some of the pilots inside them. But what they carried wasn't just ordnance, it was innovation. Their real payload was strategy, the seamless fusion of low-level terrain masking, real-time satellite intelligence, high-altitude UAV spoofing, and surgical GPS-guided weapons. In just 90 seconds, these aging jets dismantled a base built to repel stealth bombers. They didn't rely on overwhelming firepower. They relied on timing, misdirection, and asymmetric insight. It was the kind of strike that proves warfare isn't about who has the most expensive toys, it's about who plays the smartest game. And the implications were global. By striking a nuclear-forward base and exposing a hidden element of Russia's battlefield deterrent strategy, Ukraine did more than win a tactical victory. They dealt a strategic blow that rattled Moscow's assumptions. The message was clear. Not even nuclear shadows can protect outdated doctrine. This operation